Oh, hang on, is this going to... Okay, so I'll just ask you a question off camera.
Yeah.
Well, I volunteered, actually. I'll talk about... The best thing is if I say what it's like with Tracy. So, it was very difficult early on. One of the things I found with having a kid is that you actually have to work as a team, and if you're not really close, because everyone who's watching this who's had a kid who even has a nephew or whatever, a niece, knows that it can be really arduous sometimes. And... particularly in those early stages, and you're broken and exhausted and shattered, and the only person you've got to take it out on is your partner. I'm glad we were as tight as we were before we had a child, otherwise it would have, I can't imagine what would have happened. Even more so for type 1 diabetes, the fact that we're still together, I think, I'm actually really proud of that. But the one thing I would say is that in many ways we've had to sort of agree to disagree, so there's almost a conference about how we should care for him, and both of us wants to be as hands-on as possible, and there's been different moments. So when Ava was born, I was entirely in charge of George during the nights, and that doesn't sound so heroic, because Ava wasn't a great sleeper, so Tracy was being brutalised and I was dealing with all the things you've just talked about on camera. But Tracy felt that she was missing out, and that she wasn't contributing with George, and I know what that feels like. If one of you feels the junior partner in this, it feels sort of terrible, because once you take that back seat, you're there forever, and he's my son, I'm not taking a backward step. And Tracy feels the same way. I would never infringe with a mother's right. God knows. Mums are better than dads. That's an ultra truth. But I'm not backing down with George. I'm not taking part. So one of the things that we found is that early on, so even now we'll have a debate about whether a temporary basal is better than just me giving him a few free carbs up front or whatever it might be. It's very interesting that you have different techniques, and then we do have to agree. We will go through a process, but we'll agree we'll get there. Early on, Tracy, the big difference was that she was, and I think it's a result of still hanging out with the NCT group, because George was 6 months when he was diagnosed. So I think she felt like she was in judgment there. She felt jealousy towards the other mums who had these babies who were healthy. She felt a sort of silent outrage that they didn't understand.
I can totally understand that.
And so her position comes from that, where I think that the bit that broke Tracy in the hospital, this is a rambly, the bit that broke Tracy in the hospital was Barbara, who everyone's going to meet, told us on the first day we were in the ward that George was eligible, can't even say it, for disability allowance.
I know,
and she fell apart, literally.
Disabled,
Yeah, and I think...
really struggle with that, with the whole disabled thing.
Yeah, well, okay. So, I think all of those things, her response, I didn't like hearing that word at all, but that, God, I don't mean to sound unkind towards anyone who's suffering from a disability, but it's just the enormity of that word and all its connotations.
I know.
The other things smacked me harder during the whole process of George being diagnosed. The thing that Tracy always says is that George is sick. And I say he's not sick because I'm not having it, and it's a sort of stubborn being a stubborn boy, I think I won't take that. I'm not having it. And she says yes he is, he's got an effing organ that doesn't work. And she's right, but I'm not having it. It's just got something we have to deal with. So there's a fundamental difference in the way we view things, and occasionally it's caused friction, but we've had to go through this process where we will talk through everything and we'll get there, but it's hard, right? So
it is.
How do you guys... That's
really interesting what you say about how you view it differently, because I think we don't view it differently, but we do disagree on how to treat him. And I know that I was definitely really at fault in the early days of... So the division of labour in our household is, because I work very part-time and I do most of the childcare. I'm largely the diabetes carer, although not that James doesn't do anything, it's just he's out of work all day, so he can't during the day. And it also means in the nights in the week I look after diabetes, and then I get lots of fly-ins at the weekend, so it's fine. But I think it's interesting what you say. I think we're more in your kind of camp in terms of we don't think of him as being sick, if you like. we think of him as having diabetes to deal with, if you know what I
Yeah,
mean.
yeah,
But not to say we don't argue about treatment, and I was really dreadful in the early days. I think my way of coping with it all was to be a forensic kind of details person. I mean, I'm still more like that than he is now, but I was sort of went into overdrive, and I was, you know how you have the diaries and you write the numbers down every day, and the 2 hourly checks and this, that, and the other, and I'd be counting half carbs and all sorts of things. I'd be so detailed about it, and my view at the time was that James's approach was incredibly laid back in comparison to mine,
right,
and it freaked me out, and and I was sort of really wicked to him about it. I was sort of very critical of his handling of the situation, and I think it was more than anything an approach and a kind of manner rather than actual the treatment. But I think my way of coping with it to feel better about it was to feel as in control as possible, and I felt he was just like, oh, it's fine. And it was to do him a big disservice, and it did create friction. Yeah. And every time I saw him, my first question was, what are his levels? What's going on? Yeah. And I would, sort of, if something would go awry, as it always does with diabetes, because it's such a changeable, varying thing all the time, so many factors affecting it. Especially in the early days when you don't have a clue what you're doing, and something would happen, like go horribly high. And I'd be, well, that's because you've done this, or and we don't. I really try now not to call him out on anything, because when I think about it, I've made so many mistakes. If you like, I put a cannula on 2 nights ago, for having forgotten to remove the plastic sheath off the top of the needle. Golly. Can you imagine? Oh. So, because of having to pin him down, I had to chase Indy around and get him out from under the table. He was sort of laughing, but anyway. Yes. It was a stressful situation, and in my hurry to take the thing apart and get it all ready, I forgot to take the final thing off, the little cover of the needle. And then he went gradually higher and higher and higher in the night, and I was thinking, this is weird, the corrections on, and then it turned out that was totally my fault, and I put my hands up, that was me. And he never ever criticised, James never criticises me for when I do stuff like that. And so you've got to be so forgiving of one another and supportive.
It is tough. I remember early on in hospital, Tracy, and part of the way we wanted to get the care down, the only way you can learn is by doing it, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
We would take it in turns to inject, and I realised that I'd done about 4 in a row and she still hadn't, and that was a terrible thing to do, but it's a product of me being a little eager. Yeah. And then Tracy would have a turn and we'd both get confident, and then one day, and this is because this is a mother who's been in hospital for nearly 2 weeks and been through the worst experience of her life, but she injected him twice with his Levemir, his whole day's basal rate, and that was just horrific. But of course, there's a flash where each of you, I think, feels an anger if you think the other one has not done what they could, but you realise that it comes from...
It could have easily been you that did it. Oh my God.
And has been, of course. Yeah, okay.
Oh God.
Well, I feel I've asked you, why should people know more about type 1? Just tell me a little bit about Indy then. What's he like? Can you describe him in a few words?
I can. He's independent, Indy. He's very self-assured and confident and stubborn and funny and cheeky and assertive, and can be a bit difficult at times because he likes to do things his way. But he's lovely and wonderful and just a joy, actually a real joy, and so stoic about dealing with type 1. It's inspiring.
How's he changed your life?
Sorry?
How's Indy changed your life? He's number 2 as well. People should be reminded of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think since his diagnosis, like I said, he's inspiring. He's so stoic, just gets on with it. And I think that teaches me to try to do that more with life generally, and to kind of appreciate what you have, you know.
Yeah.
It's such a cliche, but you know, until you're in ill health or something happens to you, or you end up in hospital or whatever, just kind of, you know, take everything for granted. And I think he helps teach us every day that he triumphs through adversity, and he never complains. You know, his poor little fingers are marked all over.
Yeah.
You know, they're fine, they're not sore, but they're calloused, you know, there's just pricks all over the place. And he just never complains about that, ever, ever, ever. And it's just, you just think, oh, you know, if he's 3.5 and he can kind of just do this, I should just shut up sometimes.
And I'm going to go around the houses here. I'll come back and cut this. You're going on holiday in a few days.
We are.
How has Indy changed your packing? What have you packed for Indy?
I haven't packed yet because I'm not very
What will you need to do?
But I have the only thing I've made a list of so far is the diabetes stuff.
And good. What's that then?
Okay. Test strips for testing his blood.
You're going for 3 weeks, right?
No, not quite, but over 2.
How many of them are you going to need?
This is where I have to admit how many I do a day. I mean, it's your worst nightmare running out of test strips, because if you don't have test strips, you can't really give insulin accurately or anything. I mean, you're screwed. So, and we have run out before now.
Have you had to pre-plan this holiday and go to the doctor? And
yeah, in fact, I'm still waiting. There's often issues with getting test strips, as lots of people will know, and I'm still waiting. I have to phone them as soon as we finished today.
Right.
I have to phone them up and chase the prescription. But yeah, you know, you have to take more than you would need. So taking loads of test strips. You have to take the things called lancets, which prick the fingers.
Yeah.
We have to take spare batteries for his meter, a spare meter. We have to take a ketones meter, strips for the ketones meter, batteries for the ketones meter. Insulin, got to keep it all cold. So we've got these Frio bag things, which you guys told us about. What else? We've got to take the pens in case something happens to the pump, I guess. Although we also have we've got a holiday pump loan, which is great.
Great.
What else do we take? Oh god, and it's the hypo treatment. It's like how many love hearts and polos should I be taking? I have no idea. I was figuring on like a packet of each a day, but maybe a tube of each, but maybe I need more. I don't know. We've just got a box, literally a whole box. Shall I show you?
Yeah, great.
I just ordered. This is how we order the love hearts. In bulk. This is full of love hearts in here.
Oh my goodness. Let's have a look.
And you might be able to see our hypo treatment selection over
Yeah, there we
here
go.
as well.
Let's do a...
You know, just like millions of them.
Wow.
And, you know, so...
Wow.